How many times in your daily life have you found yourself analyzing or judging other people's actions? Maybe it's that friend who, despite your advice, keeps insisting on following a path that seems clearly wrong to you. Or perhaps it's a coworker who seems to make decisions that, in your opinion, are disastrous. In some cases, you might even feel a sense of relief seeing that other people's lives aren't as perfect as they seem, as if that somehow justifies or diminishes your own challenges. But wait, what if I told you that by continuing to focus on others, you're missing out on something far more valuable, something that can actually transform the way you feel and live? Focusing on others not only drains your energy, but also prevents you from seeing the hidden potential within yourself. In the next few minutes, we'll explore the real impact of shifting the focus inward and how this simple change can open doors you didn't even know existed. Keep watching to discover how this perspective can transform your life in ways you never imagined. Human beings have an almost automatic inclination to observe, judge, and often criticize the choices and actions of those around them. This is, in part, a way we find to feel better about our own lives. But here's an intriguing question. By focusing so much on what others do or don't do, are we not distracting ourselves from what really matters? And more importantly, are we missing out on precious opportunities to look within ourselves by being so preoccupied with the lives of others? Think about it for a moment. From an early age, we are taught to look outward, to compare, measure, and judge. We grow up in a society that encourages us to mirror others, to seek validation externally. But in doing so, are we not diverting our focus from the only thing we truly have control over? Ourselves? This introduction brings us to an essential reflection. While we are busy focusing on the flaws, successes, or choices of others, what are we missing in ourselves? How much time, energy, and attention is being wasted on something we ultimately have no control over? And more importantly, are we using that time productively, or are we distancing ourselves from true self-awareness? A classic example of this is social media. Think about the last time you opened a platform like Instagram or Facebook. How many minutes or hours did you spend scrolling through, looking at photos and videos of other people? How many times did you catch yourself thinking, why is that person always traveling and I'm not? Or, why does their life seem so perfect while mine feels like chaos? It's at that moment that the cycle of comparison begins, and without realizing it, we become prisoners of a mindset that takes us away from our true essence. In this video, we will explore how we can break this cycle. What happens when we stop looking outward and start turning inward? Is there a deeper path to understanding and satisfaction that doesn't depend on what others do or how they live? Get ready for a profound reflection, as today we will explore the transformative power of focusing on yourself and abandoning the need to judge or compare yourself to others. Now, I ask you, why do we spend so much time worrying about the actions and choices of other people? The answer may lie in a psychological concept known as projection. Simply put, we project our own fears, insecurities, and anxieties onto others. For example, if we are dissatisfied with our own professional life, it's easier to criticize a coworker's performance than to deal with our own feelings of inadequacy. So, I ask again, what are we losing by focusing so much on others? Imagine the time and energy we invest in judging and observing others' behavior. If we redirected that energy inward, what could we discover about who we are, about our own desires, fears, and aspirations? We would probably find much more than we ever imagined. It's like a house with dirty windows. When we spend all our time looking outside, we see the world through a blurry lens, distorted by our own prejudices and judgments. However, when we clean those windows, in other words, when we turn inward, we begin to see things more clearly, including our own inner truth. Let's talk a little about comparison. We live in an era where comparing our lives with others has never been easier. Social media, pictures of perfect vacations, seemingly successful careers. All of this contributes to a vicious cycle of comparison that can lead us into a spiral of constant dissatisfaction. Have you ever found yourself thinking, if I had what they have, I'd be happier. Or if my life were like theirs, I'd feel fulfilled. This kind of thinking is dangerous. To illustrate this, let me tell you a small story. Once, I met a woman named Clara. Clara had everything many would consider a perfect life: a successful career, a beautiful home, and a loving family. Yet, she spent hours on social media, comparing herself to other people who, in her view, had even more incredible lives. One day, Clara realized that despite having everything she had ever dreamed of, she felt deeply unsatisfied. Constant comparison had stolen her joy. This is what happens when we measure our success or happiness based on other people's lives. We fall into a mental trap where nothing we have is ever enough. Clara began to ask herself, why am I seeking happiness in others? What do I really want for myself? And it was in this moment of introspection that she began to reconnect with her own essence. Clara discovered that her true happiness came from simple things, like spending quality time with her family and practicing meditation, which she had neglected. Clara's story illustrates an important point. When we compare ourselves to others, we stray from our own path. Each of us has a unique journey with its own challenges and rewards. Measuring our life by someone else's standards is a sure recipe for frustration. The key to breaking free from this cycle is recognizing that true success and true happiness come from within, not from what we see around us. Now, I invite you to reflect on what it really means to know yourself. What comes to mind when you think of that? Many people go through life without ever stopping to reflect on who they truly are. They move from task to task, from goal to goal, without ever asking themselves, what really matters to me? Who am I beyond the roles I play in society? The truth is that self-knowledge is the foundation for a fulfilling life. When we turn our gaze inward, we begin to notice things that were previously hidden beneath layers of social conditioning and external expectations. We start to understand our motivations, fears, and desires more clearly. An interesting example is the process many people go through during meditation. Meditating is a powerful way to turn inward and reconnect with what really matters. I remember a story about a meditation practitioner named Daniel. He was a businessman, always busy, always focused on external results. One day, he decided to attend a 10-day silent retreat. During the retreat, without external distractions, Daniel came face to face with thoughts and emotions he had avoided for years. At first, it was uncomfortable, but over time, he began to realize that discomfort was part of the self-knowledge process. Daniel came out of that retreat with a new perspective. He realized that his relentless desire for external success was rooted in a deep feeling of inadequacy that he had developed in childhood. With this new insight, Daniel began to change his approach to life. He was still a successful businessman, but now his focus was on balancing his inner and outer life. He realized that by knowing himself, he could live with much more peace and authenticity. This story shows us that self-knowledge is a journey, not a destination. By turning our attention inward, we begin to discover truths about ourselves that can transform the way we live. And this brings us to the next point, the importance of understanding our own emotions. Many times, we are guided by our emotions unconsciously. Emotions arise, and we react almost automatically to them, without giving space for deeper analysis. How many times have you exploded with anger, felt sad or anxious, without even understanding the real reason behind those emotions? It's as if we're on autopilot, living our lives reactively, without a clear understanding of what's going on inside us. When we spend so much time focusing on others, we also tend to project our emotions and frustrations onto them. We say things like, that person made me angry, or the situation at work is stressing me out, placing the blame on the external world for our emotional states. However, what if the true source of our emotions lies within us, and not in other people's behavior or life circumstances? This is where the practice of mindfulness can bring profound transformation. Mindfulness, or full attention, is a practice that teaches us to pay attention to the present moment, intentionally and without judgment. Instead of being swept away by emotional tides, we begin to observe our thoughts and emotions with a certain distance, as if we were spectators rather than direct participants in the drama unfolding in our minds. This doesn't mean we suppress or ignore our emotions, but rather that we embrace them with curiosity and compassion. Let's imagine that our emotions are like waves in a vast ocean. Some waves are small and almost imperceptible, like a slight irritation or discomfort. Others are enormous, like an outburst of anger or deep sadness. What most of us do is get carried away by these waves, without any control, reacting impulsively. But what mindfulness teaches us is to sit on the shore and watch the waves come and go, without letting ourselves be dragged by them. Over time, we realize that just like the ocean's waves, our emotions are also temporary. They arise, reach a peak, and eventually dissipate. This practice of observing our emotions may seem simple, but it has a profound impact on our daily lives. When we develop this mindfulness skill, we become more aware of how we react to situations. For example, instead of exploding with anger when something irritates us, we begin to observe this anger arise within us. Why am I feeling this way? What is the true source of this anger? These are questions we can ask ourselves in the heat of the moment. Moreover, mindfulness teaches us to cultivate self-compassion. Often, we are our own harshest critics, judging ourselves with a severity we wouldn't have toward others. I should be more productive. Why do I still feel this way? I'm not good enough. These inner voices can be relentless. But when we practice mindfulness, we learn to bring an attitude of kindness toward ourselves. We realize that our emotions and thoughts aren't mistakes, but simply part of the human experience. With this self-compassion, we become more resilient and less likely to be overwhelmed by negative emotions. There's a quote by Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh that says, "Mindfulness is the miracle of bringing back the mind to the body so that we can live each moment of life fully." He reminds us that when we are present and aware, we are no longer at the mercy of our impulses and automatic reactions. We begin to relate to the world in a more intentional and conscious way. The practice of mindfulness is not limited to specific moments of meditation. It can be integrated into all areas of our lives. Imagine being fully present during a conversation with a friend, without distractions, without thinking about what you're going to say next. Or, for example, paying full attention to a meal, savoring each bite, and noticing the flavors, textures, and aromas. These simple yet intentional moments connect us with life in a way we often overlook when we're constantly distracted. I remember a story of a woman named Anna who began practicing mindfulness after realizing her emotions were out of control. Whenever something went wrong at work, she would immediately react with anger or frustration. This hurt her professional relationships and her emotional well-being. After starting to practice mindfulness, Anna learned to pause before reacting. Instead of being overwhelmed by anger, she started observing the rise of this emotion, which gave her time to choose how to respond. This not only improved her emotional well-being, but also the quality of her interactions with her colleagues. Additionally, one of the most profound benefits of mindfulness is that it helps us develop a sense of acceptance. Often, we resist what we feel. We want to get rid of pain, anxiety, or sadness as quickly as possible. But paradoxically, the more we try to resist or suppress our emotions, the stronger they become. Mindfulness teaches us to accept what is present at the moment without trying to change or eliminate anything. And with this acceptance comes freedom. By stopping the fight against what we're feeling, we find an inner peace that once seemed impossible. Mindfulness is not a practice you master overnight. It is a continuous path of discovery and acceptance. Every time you sit down to meditate or bring mindfulness to a daily task, you are cultivating your ability to be present. And over time, this presence begins to transform all aspects of your life. Your relationships, your work, your self-care. So instead of seeking answers in other people's behavior or external circumstances, try looking inward. Through mindfulness, you will learn to understand your emotions, accept the present moment as it is, and respond to the world with greater clarity and compassion. This practice is an invaluable tool for self-awareness, allowing you to discover the power that already exists within you, rather than seeking it outside. This is the power of understanding your emotions. When we stop blaming the outside world and start observing what's happening inside us, we gain control over our reactions and, consequently, over our lives. But that doesn't mean we should ignore the impact we have on others. Focusing on yourself can also be a way to benefit those around you, as we'll see next. It's common to think that by focusing on ourselves, we are being selfish. However, the truth is that when we are at peace and aligned internally, we can influence others in a much more positive way. Have you ever noticed how people who are in harmony with themselves have a calming effect on those around them? This is no coincidence. When we cultivate our own inner peace, we create an environment around us that reflects that harmony. The people around us begin to feel it, and they are often inspired to do the same. We don't need to force or persuade anyone. Our example alone is enough. Let me tell you another story. Once, I met a man named Lucas, who was known for his unshakable calmness. He worked in a high-pressure environment where many people were constantly stressed. However, Lucas never seemed to be affected. He always maintained a calm demeanor, even in the most challenging situations. Over time, people began to notice this, and instead of questioning his behavior, they started asking how he managed to stay so peaceful. Lucas then began sharing his self-care and meditation practices with his colleagues, not in an ostentatious way, but as a simple conversation. The effect was remarkable. Little by little, more and more people began adopting small practices that Lucas recommended, and the work environment started to change. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but over time, Lucas' calmness subtly but powerfully influenced the entire office. This story illustrates that focusing on yourself is not just a personal benefit. When we are in balance, we naturally affect others in an inspiring way. The peace we cultivate within ourselves radiates outward, influencing those around us in ways we may not even imagine. Now that we've reached the end of this reflection, let's revisit the main points we discussed. Spending time and energy judging others takes us away from something far more important: self-awareness. Comparing our lives to others leads us into a trap of dissatisfaction and frustration. However, by turning our attention inward, we discover true peace and emotional clarity. When we begin to understand our own emotions, we gain the ability to respond to life consciously rather than react automatically. And by transforming ourselves, we naturally influence others positively. Personal transformation is not selfish. It's a way to create a real and lasting impact on the world. So, I ask you, what would you discover about yourself if you stopped worrying so much about others? If you redirected your attention to your own growth and inner peace, how would that change your life and the lives of those around you? If you enjoyed this content and want to continue exploring the path of self-awareness, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you can follow new videos that will bring more reflections and practices to help you live a more conscious and balanced life. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.